he said, no, I want you to be my head coach. And it was, to be in fights at that magnitude, honestly, obviously still the rematch with Povetkin, when he won his WBC interim title, that's still my greatest achievement.
I always like to start with, like I was saying to you before, you kind of think you know people from back in the day, but there's actually loads of stuff that I don't know about you. So I want to take it back. You were brought up around this area, though, weren't you? Was it all Mill Hill, was it?
Yep.
Mill Hill.
Yeah. Well, basically born and bred in Mill Hill. I'm 52 now. Moved to Mill Hill maybe when I was like 2-3 years old. So yeah, I've been there a long time. All my life I've been in Mill Hill. So this is only about 15-20 minutes away.
Growing up around that area, what was it like? Talk to me about the young Xavier in Mill Hill, London.
My parents moved to Mill Hill really to get away from the area they were living in previously. They spent some time in Harles and Chalk Hill, and it's a very different environment. My mum and dad, I spoke to them about it, and they said they didn't really want to bring their kids up in that area because at the time there was a lot of different things going on. A lot of bad things happening, especially to our people. So they wanted a safer environment for me and my brother, and that came with some different challenges because then you're in an area where you're not familiar. My childhood was amazing. I can't fault it. I got very good mum and dad. So yeah.
So you're talking about, I'm guessing, hold on, 52, 70s then. 70s in Mill Hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different. Not what it looks like now.
Yeah,
honestly, I didn't experience what my parents did. I got used to the environment because that's what I was brought up in. I was far too young and too small to understand it. It's only years later that they actually explained to me that when they moved to Mill Hill, the house they actually bought, and they both had to do 2 or 3 jobs because at the time, obviously, it's very, very difficult times. The strange thing was that everybody on that road, they signed a petition saying they didn't want any black people living on that road. You just didn't have black people in that area at the time. So, that came with a whole host of, issues that they had to overcome. That's why I always say in this day and age, I think this generation, they don't realize how good they've actually got it. Back then, it's a lot harder for them. They do a lot of complaining, but they've got no idea to have to live in that sort of environment. And, you see a lot of the neighbours now and they're amazing. Everyone looks after each other. But when you first moved in, that's not what they wanted. So, they worked hard and persevered and got what they wanted.
So are the same people, the same neighbours living in that area, the same ones that signed that petition?
Some of them, yeah. Wow. But they've always been very open towards me. Like, I was a child, so it didn't really affect me in that way. It's only years later that, when I spoke to my parents, they said, yeah, this is what it was like.
And was it effectively because they had chosen, your parents, to buy the property rather than just rent? And there's a kind of different connotation of owning, taking up space forever in that area. do you know what I'm saying there?
I don't think they cared which one it was. It was like, right, this is not what we're used to. And that was it. Again, when I did get a little bit older, walk into primary school and so on, sometimes that could have been a bit of a challenge. Like, you had a lot of the flags on the windows and, you're talking about just passing like this skinhead era, and it was difficult. Like sometimes you'll get chased just for the fun of it. Do you see what I mean? And then, that's probably why I did take a liking to boxing at the time. Not really understanding why, but yeah, it was a nice area, went to a nice school. So that's why I'm very grateful to my parents for making that move, because I got given a good chance, a good start in life.
It's interesting because I always understand why parents that come from the West Indies, your parents are Jamaican, aren't they?
Yeah, dad's from Jamaica, mum's from St. Vincent.
Oh, okay. So, they come here for a better life. That's always the dream. They don't always know that they're going to have to navigate all the other stuff. They think they're coming to the motherland. They're like, ah! And then it's like, oh. Do you know what I'm saying? But they kind of took a lot of the heat off of you. But Definitely. Again, it comes with its own challenges, doesn't it? It's like, okay, you didn't grow up in a rough area, you grew up in a nice area, but then you have to navigate all of this other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everyone's got their own challenges, and it's individual to everybody. So I respect where everyone's come from. And I can only speak on what it was like at those times. Like, it's just crazy. Sometimes at night, like, it's me or my cousin or my brother, we'll get chased through certain places, and after a while, you just you're not running anymore. You're just standing and fighting sometimes. And then, me and my cousin were very protective over my younger brother as well. So, but honestly, it's like after a while, we had a lot of freedom. Like we used to just ride our bikes, God knows how far. And that's why I say my childhood was, honestly, I couldn't fault it. Couldn't have wished for a better one. I was very lucky to have the parents that I have.
You talked about a moment where you stopped running.
Mhm.
Can you remember when that was? When you thought, no, we're
Oh
not
yeah, a
taking
couple of
this.
times. Yeah, a couple of times, especially when I started moving from like primary towards secondary school. Because then you're more settled. You've got a lot of friends. And then by that time, there was more black people living in the area.
Got a little firm.
Yeah. So it started to balance up a little bit when you move like into that sort of like that era, that period. But then, yeah, from secondary school onwards, like my whole secondary school life, it didn't really feel any of that sort of racism, not to that degree. It's only really the police that were causing a lot of problems at that time. But in terms of like your peers and stuff, it was even my schools. I had a lot of fun. I love going to school, and I had a good time.
Nice. So talk to me about how you got involved in boxing. Was that kind of, you said you were obviously interested in it. Was that a kind of natural progression from, I don't know, trying to make sure that you can look after yourself?
Yeah, to be honest, it's from watching. My uncle, he was the one that found it was heavily into boxing, so he would tell me what fighters to watch. And yeah, I started watching boxing maybe 11, 12 years old, and I really liked the American fighters. To be honest, like, that's what I was really into, and we didn't have those channels over here. But someone put me in contact with somebody in America who used to sell, VHS tapes, and obviously I'm going back now because these
Yeah.
kids are not going to understand VHS. But that was like you had Betamax tape, but then you had VHS. So what I used to do was I used to do a paper round on a Thursday. Remember the day? On every Thursday, I used to do a paper round, and then on Saturday, I used to go to a car garage and wash cars for about 3 hours, and then I used to use that money to send. We used to have to send the money, and then order what
Mhm.
fights I wanted. So
Mhm.
he sent you a catalog,
Mhm.
and then you could like he used to record every single show, and then you could pick what you wanted. So it's what you could cram into like a 3 hour tape and a 4 hour tape. I remember the 3 hour tape was 12 and a 4 hour tape was £15.
Wow.
And at that time it was a lot of money, but that's where all my money went at that time. Wasn't really that heavy into fashion. I just really wanted to get these fights. And I used to watch them over and over and over again, the same fight over and over again. And I was just obsessed with how those guys would fight.
But why them over the British? Because we had our own kind of crop of,
Mhm.
contenders here. What was it about the Americans that, kept your eyes over there rather than on what was happening in the UK scene?
I think everything just started to fall into place. I mean, from my uncle telling me what fighters to watch, they were mainly American fighters, and then
Mm.
then ordering these tapes from the guy that was selling them. He's from the US, and then when I met my first boxing coach, he was doing like a after school program. He was from he was from like the Detroit area, but he moved over here, and he started doing some like boxing schools, like after school, like once or twice a week. So that's how I got into it. So meeting him,
Mm.
everything just seemed to fall into place. Like the fighters that he was talking about, I knew like everything about them because
Yeah.
I've been watching, and then always ordering like the boxing news, and I was just so obsessed with it. I think my dad used to honestly think there was something wrong with me because he used to work very long hours, so he used to leave very, very early in the morning, and he'd see me watching a particular fight. Then he'd come back late in the evening, and he'd see me watching the same fight. And
Say,
sometimes
"Boy."
he used to say, "What's wrong with you?" I knew that's really what I wanted to do.
I love that story. I think it was Bunty that said that he used to get sent, VHS tapes back in the day.
Yeah, I've never heard the interview him saying that.
Yeah,
It's
he said
interesting.
yeah, he said that. He said that, obviously because you couldn't get them over here.
So limited over here.
Yeah,
Seriously, it was limited.
yeah.
There were some fighters that I really did like. Ian Dapper Napper was one of them.
Mhm.
He was one of my favorites. But you see, again, he had more like a Midwest sort of style. So I really like what he did. Used to watch his coaches. Was a very, very good coach as well. I like Richard Williams. He went a long way. Alexander was good. I watched him. I always forget. He had a 3 round war. Keep forgetting the guy's surname, but really, really good fight. But those three in particular, I used to like watching them But Ian Napper really had the style that I liked.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it was all American fighters. It was all Ivan Robertson, Shane Mosley. Most of those kind of guys, and obviously then you had Azuma Nelson at those times as well. Mixing in with those good in that era. Gennaro Hernandez. There was just so many good fighters from over there, and I remember watching Winky Wright, because Winky Wright used to come over here regularly and beat up our fighters.
Flipping heck.
He fought Ensley Bingham and all those kind of fighters. So the schooling over there to me has always been better. And I think I was listening to a Kell Brook interview one time. I think it's after he fought Crawford, and he said he could feel the difference in schooling or education when he fought Spence and Crawford. I know the amateur system over here, we kind of got 3 levels, haven't we? I mean, going back a little bit, novices, intermediate, and
but even then, back in the day, we didn't have what we know now as those 3 levels.
Yeah.
The level of training, the knowledge was not there.
No.
And I can't speak about obviously what it was like in America.
There's 7 levels in America. And they tick off boxes.
Are you talking about their amateur or because it doesn't?
The amateur system.
It's always been a thing that I think over the last few, let's say 10 years, probably 15 years, that on the UK side they really developed the amateur style using Russians at first, wasn't it? And they were looking at Ukrainians and stuff like that to try and sort of copy that style. Whereas there was that line of thinking with the Americans that even the amateurs fought like pros.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which, to me, is kind of pointless if you're trying to box for an amateur style, but that's a story for another day. I kind of recognise that we became better at the amateurs because we had a better system. But when you're talking about the professional scene, there seemed to be, and I don't know if it was upbringing, grit, determination, I don't know what it was, but you're absolutely right.
It's education, it's the schooling. They're fundamentally better, especially like they score in. Like you get credit for body work over there. Like over here, it's mostly straight punches and head punches. Like the body as a whole, there's a target, and it took a long time to understand. But when I started watching some of the guys over there, I got it. Like their transition from amateurs to pros is a lot smoother than ours over here. We've got a lot of, the in and out movement's really good, but it's after that, it's like you're kind of like looking for something else, whereas those guys have been developing those areas already. So that's why I think most of the time when, we do come across those American fighters, we do come up short. And to me, that was the main reason. It was the education.
Yeah.
It's almost like the division we've got now, the heavyweight division. You've got the smallest guy coming up from a lighter weight is beating all the, bona fide heavyweight champions.
Yeah, but the argument is he was a great amateur with an amateur style.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
do you know what I'm saying? Now?
Again, the education.
Yeah,
the guys. A lot of people like to sneeze at the fact that the elite guys right now have had between 200 to 300 amateur fights.
Yeah,
that's a lot of times walking from the changing room to the ring. Like you're learning something each time. When you've had that many. This is why Usyk is so far ahead of all these guys, because he seems to be able to make moves way ahead of time. Like he's the smaller guy coming up, and to me, it's that education system that to me we've been a little bit lacking in.
They can overcook it sometimes, and what I find interesting is these Eastern Europeans. Do you know what I mean? They don't seem to overcook it. I don't know what it is. They're built different. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like 300 fights you're talking about Usyk had. I think Lomachenko had about 300 and something fights as well. Yeah, something like that, yeah. Right? But yet, they didn't seem to diminish when they turned over. They didn't seem to have to unlearn what they learned in the amateurs. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Because when you watch a lot of them in the amateurs and then you watch them in the pros, you can see a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
Whereas over here, it's like you've got to make a massive change to become a good pro.
Yes.
And that to me is the problem. It's making up that gap. So if you stay in that style too long and it's not transitioning to be a pro, because at the end of the day, when you start boxing, most people's dream is to eventually box as a professional fighter.
100%.
Like only a few actually want to stay and win like a gold medal or silver medal, bronze medal. Most guys want to transition. So you've got to be careful when you start making that transition. If you stay in amateur style too long, then you're playing catch up.
I have to agree. There are several people that I believe now that are in the pros that overcooked it. I think if you're not going to go to the Olympics or the Europeans or the world,
Develop a
get
pro
out.
style. Yeah.
Yeah, get out. You were talking earlier on about your American coach. Who was that?
Yeah, I called him Jen. He was from Malta, so he used to live out in Detroit, and he moved over here with his wife, and they live they lived in Mill Hill, only about 3 roads down, from where I was, and yeah, I mean, he only coached me for about, I think it was around 10, 11 months. I
Okay.
was like 15 years old because he came and done the school program, but nobody turned up after the second week. Nobody turned up. Anyone interested? It was only me that turned up. And I remember him saying, "Well, I'm going to have to stop this because obviously they're not going to fund it because there's no one here." And I started crying because I kind of waited so long to find, like, I did try a couple of other clubs, but it wasn't the style that I've been brought up on. It was very different. And then I'd go there and they'd say, "Yeah, you're very good, but we don't understand it." Like, but he understood what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I said, "No, but I want to do this." And he said, "I've got a very small setup at my house in the garage." And I told him it must have been about no more than like a 7-foot ring. He said, "I can teach you there, but I won't be coming here." So I started going there for about a good 6, 7 months. And honestly, I've never, even up to now, I've never met anyone quite like that. It's like he was just a very, very, very good teacher. And because I was so eager to learn,
Mm.
it was very easy. And because it was only me, like, he took me where I need to go and develop. So I
Yeah.
developed very, very quickly. But unfortunately, it's very short lived. Went normal day, finished school, run straight to his house, and he doesn't. He
Half
doesn't.
four? Was
He
it half
does.
three in them days?
It was like 4. I had to get there by 4, but he doesn't. I was late once. He opened the door and he said, "You're late." And I said, and it was no more than maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
Click.
And the guy did. I'd left my bag the day before, and he threw the bag out of the window,
Come out.
and that was it. And I just had to walk home. I didn't even know when the next day when I go there if he's going to actually allow me in. But discipline to him was a big, big deal. He
Mm.
said, "Look, I'm putting my time. I expect you to be here." And I was only late because one of my friends was playing around in class, so we got kept behind 10 minutes.
He didn't want to
He
hear
didn't
that.
care. He didn't
He
care.
didn't want to hear that.
So after that, I was like, used to run straight there. But yeah, on this day, a normal day, I ran, got there in time, and his wife opened the door and said, "I'm really sorry, but he's gone." And I
What?
said, "What do you mean?" I said, "What do you mean he's gone? Gone where? Like, gone away?" Or he said, "No, he passed away." Like, I didn't know that he was ill. So she said, "Oh, he's left a letter for you because he didn't, while he was." I didn't see any signs of him being ill, and I was like 15 years old. I'm not really looking out for anything like that. He's just, just an older guy who's training me.
Mm.
So that, to me, boxing after that was like done. I wasn't interested for a long, long time. Like, that took everything out of me.
Would you say that he was the first male mentor you had after your father?
Yeah, but I had a lot of good, like, male mentors in my family, like my uncles and that. They're all hardworking, and they were always encouraging me and so on and so forth. So, we used to at that age you travel and stay with a lot of different families. So yeah, like I said, that I can't fault at all. It wasn't that I didn't need that, but he was boxing.
You're lucky actually to have all that.
Boxing. Yeah, he was boxing. Like, nobody was into it like him. Like, it's just me and him were obsessed with it. So
Do you know nowadays you won't be able to invite a kid around to
no,
your shed?
no. Like even I was just about to say beforehand. Like, my mum, it was completely against it. Like, she was. I remember coming home one day and saying to her, "Right, I've found what I want to do now," and she went crazy. Like,
About the boxing or about you being in his back
no,
garden?
the boxing. She was like, "No, that's not what you're going to do. That's not really what we moved out here for."
Mm.
So she was like really upset about it. Like, so the whole time I boxed, she didn't know. My dad didn't know. I didn't want to upset her in that way again. It's like she just didn't understand it, and that was it, really.
Was it more about you getting an education and putting your full focus on that? Because like you said, most parents do not move here
Yeah.
to be playing around in a gym. I
Absolutely,
understand.
absolutely not. Like, the education for them was obviously very, very important, and moving on to higher education, and obviously, diploma degrees and so on. So that was a big deal to them. very big deal. At the time, I only really cared about boxing, but you know, everything happens for a reason. And honestly, what I learned from him was actually how to coach. That's the biggest thing I think I took from him was like, how to go about it the right way. Because a lot of coaches are very, very good. They're very good ex-fighters or they're good coaches, but it was difficult to find one that can put everything together and approach different people in different ways because everyone's an individual. Some guys, honestly, that come to my gym, like, they snap. Others are very, very patient. Others take a long time to understand what it is you're trying to teach them. Others just get it just like that. So you have to, like, as a boxing coach, you have to be very, very understanding and very patient.
Or leave the sport.
Or leave, yeah. And I think that's why it's important in the amateurs as well. It's in, like, a couple of guys here, they want to become pro coach, and I'm saying to them, no, do your education in the amateurs because you wouldn't understand how much you're learning before you transition. Like, don't try to miss and move too fast because otherwise, you're going to come unstuck at some point.
I have to agree. I think there's this whole misconception also that amateur coaches, or should I say, there's a misconception that professional coaches are better than amateur coaches. And we both know, and no disrespect to professional coaches, but it's easier, isn't it, to get a professional trainer's license than it is to get amateur to go through the ranks as an amateur coach.
I think a lot of people don't understand that the amateur coaches that are volunteering, they are actually the teachers of the sport. It's not the professionals. You're being handed a very good product, especially if you've had a good amateur upbringing. You've had a lot of fights in the amateurs. I'm handing over a good product to you for you to
already.
Yeah, for you to move forward. So
thank you.
I have more respect for the guys that built guys from the amateurs and then come forward. Like, Emmanuel Stewart had Thomas Hearns in the amateurs and then went forward, had a good pro career. I've got more respect for those guys, and it's not knocking the guys that are good pros moving forward because they're very good at what they do. But, you have to remember you did get a good product.
It does sometimes frustrate me when people talk about amateur coaches as if they are, amateur. The word is you have no level of understanding of how boxing works. And yes, we can argue that professional boxing and amateur boxing are two different sports. However, the foundations are taught where? In a place like this. Am I lying?
Yeah. I mean, Andy Joshua wouldn't be who he is without Sean Murphy.
100%.
Like, you have to remember that's where, teaching someone footwork from scratch, hand placement,
It's long, isn't it?
Getting the fighters, making them understand they need to be fit to box. All those boxes are being ticked for you as a pro coach.
Yep.
I've played both sides. So I've built fighters and I've got fighters that have had a good amateur background. And it's like, God, I haven't had to do that stage. I haven't had to do that part. So it's a little bit easier.
But also, you also understand that if you inherit a boxer that hasn't possibly had those good fundamentals like you're talking about, then you almost have to unpick to, put those pieces back together.
Yep. Difficult job, honestly. I'm an amateur boxing coach, and bear in mind, as a pro coach, you have a lot more time. The amateurs, most amateur coaches, because what they're doing is free, they've got full-time jobs. So when they finish work, do a hard day's work, and then they're in the gym at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock to help the juniors and the seniors. They're the ones that should be applauded. It's the amateur coaches. They're the teachers. You shouldn't get, especially in this era, all they keep talking about is this professional coach and that professional coach. Yeah, but show me who you built. I understand where you're coming from.
Lovely, but
a lot of guys did a lot of work for free, and now you're where you are because of the work they put in.
I'm nodding because obviously you know me from the amateurs, and it does wind me up a little bit when, I am not saying don't give your professional coaches their flowers, but as you said, these boxers didn't just turn up with them fundamentals.
No, it didn't.
Do you know what I'm saying? And equally, I wanted to go back to the point that you were talking about, the coach that wants to run before he can walk. What I would say to that coach is, listen, trust me, if you stay in the amateur scene, you get to see so many different styles, don't you? That's the 100%. First thing. If you stand in that corner, even if you're just handing up, you get to see layers 100%. Upon layers upon layers of different things. Am I lying?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does frustrate me a little bit. It really does. So you walk away from the sport for a little bit, but then boxing has its pull, doesn't it? So it pulls you back in. Did you go to the All Stars at one point?
Yeah, I went to All Stars. We again travelled a long way. Mill Hill to All Stars on the bus is not easy. And I remember meeting Mr. Akai. I mean,
Mr.
honestly, everyone says the same thing about him. Amazing guy. And he's, he makes you feel like you can do it, man. That's the one thing I took away from when I was a kid. Like, I think that was the first gym I ever went to was All Stars. I think I was 14. I think this might be just before the school program, before I met my coach. Yeah, loved it down there. I remember at the time we didn't have money for gloves and stuff, so he had gloves for you to use. Some of the gloves are so worn you could see your fingers, like your hands, like underneath the gloves. But when you don't have money at the time, you're just happy to be able to hit something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very, very welcoming, that guy, and honestly, he's a legend and done so much. And again, you see a guy that built a lot of kids, helped a lot of kids in the area, and he's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this was to help the young people. We all, in some way, everybody has to give back.
He was Mick Carney, my coach. They were best friends in the sport. There are very, very few people from kind of our time that give back to the sport, and it really frustrates me. It's another thing that frustrates me. I hear you talk about doing your paper round and earning your money to pay for your own tapes and stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's frustrating these days because everything is handed on a plate. Everybody wants to run before they can walk.
It's true. It's true, and that's why I'm trying to slow everybody down here.
Yeah.
Because they see me, but they don't understand what I put in before to be here. They don't get it. But you see, I didn't have anybody to help me get to where I was getting at that time. Like, I'm here to help you lot, but it doesn't mean that you can come where I am. I need you to put the time in because I'm going to be handing fighters over to you, and I want to make sure that you have the education to be able to deal with all these different situations. That's why when you mention the amateurs and even handing up, like you're listening to a more experienced coach giving instructions or dealing with a fighter in the corner. I remember being in the corner for an amateur fight, and it's only because I study so much boxing that one of my boxers actually got hit with a very good shot, and I said to the guys in the corner, he's hurt badly, because I could see the reaction in his legs. No one else saw it, so I was saying to him to hold. And lucky enough, because he'd been around us so long, he understood what I said. But he actually came back and won the fight. But it's those kind of experiences you need, because you're going to need them at some point in the pros. And that's what does make a good pro coach, is making the right calls at the right time. That's when they do get their flowers. That's when you need it, and it's all that time you spend, in amateur boxing.
I was in the gym for 4 seasons coaching. I was not allowed to step out of the gym, and you know what? I am glad. I am so glad for that, because then when I finally did get into that corner, only to hand up, mind you, I realised, like, boy, I can see so clearly.
Yep.
I can see so clearly. And so anyone tuning in that is a coach here underneath Xavier, truly, if he says wait, just wait. Do you know what I'm saying? Just wait. Just suck up all that knowledge, because down the line, you're going to be grateful.
100%. It's the same as a boxer coming into a gym. This could be any sport, to be honest with you. And I know you're eager to get pads or for someone to pay you some attention, but honestly, if you're coming on a regular basis, a lot of times those coaches are sitting back and waiting to see how serious you are before they give you their time. So as long as you're committed and you keep showing this is what you want to do, then one day somebody say to you, okay, I'll take you on pads. Like, you have to earn your stripes. Like, you have to wait your time. You don't just get it. It's just like in football teams, a lot of times you might even be a better player than the others, but maybe the coach is waiting to see if you're going to be able to do something different before he gives you a chance. Maybe you might not be a team player and he's waiting for you to learn to be one. Then you'll get your spot. And then when you get it, you hold on to it because you've earned the right to it.
Here's the thing. On a basic level, amateur coaches only have so many hands. They have only so many hours.
Yep.
And so obviously they are going to spend, am I lying? They're going to spend their time with the people that have, given their time, are committed. And like you said, you want to see, okay, well, yeah, you want some pads, not a problem. But are you going to be here in a week? Are you going to be here in 6 months? Are you going to be here in a year's time?
You've got to wait your time. I mean, we've had a very, very slow year in the amateurs this year, but that's by design. Like
Mm.
most of the guys that we worked in, around the time that I was around the amateurs, a lot of them have transitioned and gone pro. So there's a gap now with the new gen that are coming in. They haven't put the work in. So like maybe we didn't go out maybe more than 10, 15 times for the whole season because you're not putting in the work. Yeah, you put in the work, then you can go out. So I think they've learned a hard lesson this season. So next year I said to them, well, if you want it to be like last season, then we can do that again. It's not a problem. But I have to see you putting the work outside the gym. Like you're sparring, you're getting tired. I'm not putting you out.
Your main coach kind of passes away, and then you have that break. And then what happens after that? How did you kind of get back into the boxing?
Kind of focused a lot on education, and degree, diploma.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think I must have been maybe around 30. And my cousin was going to a fitness class, and it was being run by one of the old All Stars coaches. Actually, two of them. There were two classes. One was Ken Thomas, was doing a class. I think it might have been midweek, and then Saturday was Earl Austin. And I was overweight, and I just wanted to just get fit. And my cousin said, "Oh, let's go here." And not knowing who they were, I started boxing. And I remember, I think it was Earl. He said, "Oh, where did you learn to box?" I said, I stopped boxing years ago, and, I boxed with a guy, who used to coach in Detroit. Became very close to those two, and I kind of like became interested in boxing again, and then eventually got into coaching. I did my amateur coaching in Stowbridge. That's where I got my qualifications. Then, yeah, eventually came to Neasden, and me and my business partner Nick, we when we came here, they were doing boxing, but there was only like 4 or 5 people here. And the ladies who run the centre said, we're going to stop the boxing in a couple of weeks. And I remember walking to that front desk and saying to her, "Can you just give me a chance? Because I don't really want to be working in anybody else's gym anymore because I've gone like as far as I can go with them. There's a style of boxing that I want to teach, and you can't really do that in someone else's gym because it's disrespectful. You're working under them."
It's true.
And I said, "Yeah, just give me a couple of weeks and let see what I can do here." I remember the first day it was like 30 people. Then the next session was like 40. The next time I came in, she just gave me the key, and I've been here ever since. And that was that was right at the end of 2013.
I kind of smiled inside when you said it is disrespectful to kind of go and work under somebody and then try and make yourself busy, as my coach used to call it.
Yeah, it is. To me, it is. I mean, if they've obviously had coaches before them, or that's where they started, and they've got a style of boxing that they want to teach. And when you're going there, you're going to learn from them and get if they don't have any qualifications, you're going to get your coaching badges from their gym. So, funny enough, Stonebridge, after one session, I remember being introduced to the head coach, and the guy who runs it said, "Listen, he knows what he's doing," and this gave me the key. This was after the second session I was coaching there, and then I managed to apply for they signed me off to get my badges and so on. And then eventually I just moved on to my own, and some of the boxers that I knew from before I even went to Stonebridge, they just followed me where I went, and they're still here now.
I know how challenging it was. I think I got my first amateur qualification in 2003, right? It was challenging. Tell me about what it was like for you, not just getting those badges, but running your own gym.
There's so running
There's so many.
Running a gym. Honestly, like I've like I said, I spent years getting back into education. Started as a mentor, then went on to Senko, and eventually became a head teacher. But honestly, that journey was a lot easier than boxing.
Why did I know you were going to say that?
It was so much easier. Like when you're a new club, it's almost like the other clubs that have been around a long time are looking at you like, "Who the hell are you?
Who's this clown?"
Yeah, who is IQ boxing?" And that's kind of how it was. Like as we went through the system, we had to earn our way, and then you're hearing people saying, "Oh, they're trying to box like this person or that person." And we just wanted to just get our foot in the door and get the boxers that we had. We just wanted them to get out because we knew how important it was for them to get experience. Because the whole idea was by a certain date, a certain year was to turn pro. So, we traveled all over the place, and it was just me and Nick. So we had to go everywhere. And a lot of times people are saying, "No, we've never heard that club before." So you got those challenges. And, eventually when you do get there and you come a little bit more established, then you've got a building that you've got issues with. They don't have community centres anymore or youth centres. They're becoming a thing of the past. So it's been a challenge holding on to this one, but we've worked very hard to do so. Like we need these sort of like young people need somewhere to go. I don't know why they've knocked them down, and now they're talking about maybe we need to rebuild them again. Like it shouldn't have happened. Like the more of these kind of centers we have, the more these young people can come to in a safe environment, and either you're doing boxing for fitness, or you just want to be able to look after yourself, or you want to end up becoming a professional boxer. There's so much boxes that you tick. Helping and supporting young people.
100%.
I got some people to say to me, I'm just so happy that at the time you gave me your time. I didn't want to be a boxer, but it was nice to be around this environment. We've been here like a long, long time, and there's never been an incident here. Like everyone's felt safe here. So that for more than anything else, for me and Nick, like we feel more happy, and we feel like we've achieved something in that regard, more so than even, what we won in the amateurs or won in the pros.
What is beautiful when I walked in is you've got obviously some of the accolades from, the current accolades, but then you come through to the gym and off onto the side room and you see some proper old school photos.
We've been here since 2013, so
what is that?
Yeah, a good 12.
My maths is terrible.
Yeah,
so a good 12 or 13 years.
Yeah. We've been here, in recent times, I've had a lot of support when people knew that, like, we are going to be staying here. I've had help with the flooring. Took some time, painting the building. We're going to work on fixing the outside of it now. So, everyone always coming in saying, "Oh, you should do this, you should do that." Yeah, but where's the money coming from?
It's not as easy as that.
It'll happen when it's supposed to happen. The most important thing is that we had a place to train and we were able to go out and fight. That was the most important thing.
I commend you on the fact that you've kept it going, because it is a difficult thing to keep the roof over your head, especially in a prime location.
Really hard.
It's a difficult thing to keep coaches. It's ongoing, isn't it?
Yeah. Especially coaches. Amateur coaches are not getting paid, so they don't have to come here after work. So that's another thing is obviously if your gym is making money, you can afford to pay the coaches. We're not at that space yet, but that's what we're trying to get to. Is so we can afford to pay our coaches, because obviously, it costs to come here. Like petrol's expensive now, travel's expensive. Taking boxers to different tournaments, it's expensive. So that's what we're trying to build now is get some funding in so we can start paying these guys for their time.
But you are now predominantly on the pro scene. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, between me and Nick, we're balancing it.
Does it help the fact that you've kind of got a wingman rather than someone who's trying to step on your toes and you're trying to step on his toes? You both know your roles and you're quite happy to just
stay
in your lane.
Yeah, we've always been in support of each other. Obviously, I'm a lot older, so eventually it is, everything will get handed over and then Nick will have to run everything. But we've always done everything straight on the line, 50-50, the responsibility, paying for stuff. Like we always come together and say, right, we need this. How are we going to get the money to get that? But we've always been like that, me and Nick, from the beginning. So honestly, I'm very lucky to have met someone like that, and he's very, very mature. There's a good 12, 13 years between me and Nick, but you wouldn't think so because he's very mature.
You obviously mentioned Don Charles there. You were under his wing for a while, weren't you? Soaking in all that knowledge.
Yeah, I think with Don, it wasn't really anything to do with boxing. Don's got his style. I've got mine. It's never really been that. It's more a case of Don he's been like a big brother. So he's very protective of me. So he warned me about, what individuals are going to be around the pro scene because you're coming from the amateurs. He's been like, every time I've needed any support, like he's always been there, and he will always advise me and say, right, listen, no, don't do that. Like you need to do this. And he's like that now, but it's nothing to really do with boxing. Even when he said to me, I want you to come and help in the corner. He said to me, don't question anything. I'm going to call you and then you're just going to be in the corner. He said, you'll understand why later. Just do what I'm telling you. Don't worry about it. So he would randomly say to me, right, you're in the corner with this fighter this weekend, or you're in that fight with this one. And it was like, so when I actually started like cornering my own fighters, it's like, it's a good thing because I'd been somewhere they hadn't been before. And obviously I was involved in some big fights as well. So it was nothing new to me when I got my break, because I'd already been, carefully guided by this man,
I want to go back to because firstly, let's be fair. From what I understand about the pro scene, is it's a little, let's say, cutthroat. So, firstly, who has the biggest snakes, the amateur scene or the pro scene?
I had a lot more issues than the amateurs.
Serious?
Than the pros, yeah. I had a lot more issues in the amateurs. A lot more. I don't really have that much issues in the pros, to be honest with you. To me, the pros is pretty obvious and straightforward. You're a prize fighter. You're in there to make money. If you're managing a fighter, you're going to get them the best fights possible for the most amount of money. And if that means they don't have to fight that particular person, they won't do it. So you kind of understand, because really what promoters, to me, from what I've gathered, is that when you sign a boxer as a promoter, what you want to do is get your investment back. So you're putting them on this show and that show, but really what you ultimately want them to do is be able to sell out a stadium or sell out an arena, or have a big home show, a big home platform, or be able to sell at the O2. That's more the kind of fighters to me that get signed. And anything under that, you're kind of there to assist their career. It's for you to go and rip up the script. So when you understand what it is, you don't get upset about it. I always say to my fighters, right, okay, you've got the phone call. There's a reason why they've called you. It's either because you've got a very good record, or at times, to me, some promoters have had a fighter so long that they're going to put them in with somebody who they might beat them.
A little test.
And then, then they're going to give you the shot. Then you're going to take their spot. I always say to them, well, that's down to you now. I said, if you haven't had a, let's say, a glorified like amateur boxing career, and you come across someone who has, more than likely they're going to get signed. It's your job when you get in the ring with you.
Snatch it.
You need to beat them. And if you come up short, then don't come here and complain, because you know what it is. That's the route you've had to take. Generally in boxing, we talk about this all the time in my gym. The guys at the top of the sport right now, the elite guys, they all seem to have something very similar. And that's the amount of amateur fights they've had.
100%.
You look at Terence Crawford, Shakur, Devin, all these guys, they've all had like 200 plus. When you're a guy that's had 10, 15, 20, you're not supposed to beat them. Every now and then somebody will be able to come along and do that. But generally, that's not what happens in boxing,
Can I ask you about those 10, 15 bouters that, and then we did touch on it earlier, that we said, if you're not going to, and again, I think it depends on age, if you're not going to go down the world, European, Olympic route, then turn over, okay? And we're pretty much in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Where I have a difficulty is when you get to sort of 10 and 15 and they're expecting to be further than they are. How do you manage those expectations in a fighter?
For me, it's the same way I view education. Everyone's ceiling is different. I'll look at some boxing and say, right, you know what, a Southern area belt for you is going to feel like a world title because that's your level. Some English, some British. Some guys I look at and I think, yeah, maybe, domestic scene might not be your fit, but you might be challenging someone for a world title because of the style you've got. I judge every single fighter different and have different expectations of them. I don't say, right, well, he got to here, so you should be able to get there. It doesn't work like that. But
that's your expectations. How do you manage their expectations? Because here's the thing. Do you say to them, listen, at best, you're a southern area, and there's nothing wrong with getting to southern area. Do you have that conversation with them, or... Yeah.
Well... people get very sensitive about boxing, football, whatever else it is. In the football season, when the season's finished and you finish wherever you finished, that's because that's where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Over the whole season, you played a certain amount of games, you've won a certain amount of points, and that's where you're supposed to be. If you fight for a Southern area and you win, and then you win an English title, but you come up short of British, that's where you're supposed to be.
That's your level.
At that moment in time, that's your level. And you can feel that you're above that, but you have to prove it and show it. And that's how I come across to all my boxers. Like, okay, well, you're supposed to be this and be that. Well, then you got to show it. Otherwise, there's no point talking. So everybody gets judged here, and then we see your level. And I think everyone here has got used to understanding how I am. I don't really want to hear your nonsense. Like, if
I
you're,
want to see it.
I want to see it.
Yeah.
And some guys that come into my gym, you know, especially guys that haven't had that much amateur experience, they're saying to me, well, I could beat up that guy. And I'll say, listen, you're not ready for that yet. That's not going to be a good idea for you at the moment. But I said, come back to me in 6 months to a year. You've been here, you haven't been here that long, and then I'll put you in with him. No, I can beat him. Okay, then. The next time you come in, that's who you're sparring. And 9 times out of 10, it's gone badly. But you see, then you come to me after and say, all right, I understand now. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way.
Sometimes I have to feel.
Yeah, that's the way it is. And then you can realize, right, okay, I'm not at that guy's level yet. And then you work harder.
It's interesting because I feel, and maybe this is a change that's happening recently, that you couldn't have spoken to a coach like that and said, I want what? Who are you talking to?
No, I hate this culture at the moment of boxer trainer. I hate it. What I've experienced in the last, I think, 6-7 years. Honestly, if someone told me before that this could happen, I would have said, there's no way. The disrespect of some of these boxers, the way they talk to some of these coaches. I mean, even now in social media, you've got a coach that spent years and years getting you to where you are. You're not with them anymore, and then you're talking disrespectful.
Oh my days!
That's a conversation to me you have that should be private.
I agree.
You shouldn't do that. It makes everybody look bad, and that's why I only keep certain boxers close to me, because you give so much, and then you get disrespected.
I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because I feel like sometimes people are. Yes, when someone is a professional, the relationship between coach and fighter possibly changes because the trainer's getting paid. However, I still believe that there has to be, although it's a democratic style of possibly of coaching, there still has to be that level of respect where at the top of the tree is the trainer.
100%.
What are we doing here if a fighter can say F off or do this or come, jump, do this, do that? What are we doing here? Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm glad you brought that up, because like I said to you off camera, it's one of the reasons why I walked away from full-time coaching is the level of disrespect, the level of self-entitlement. But that's another day's podcast.
Yeah, it's bad.
It is bad. So you told me that Don said, I'll give you the nod when it's time to get in the corner with me.
Yeah.
Can you remember the first time that you did get the old nod? And
I think he called me for, I think it might have been a Miles. It was either Miles Shinkwin or Frank Buglioni. I've seen them around the gym, but I didn't know them. I never done any training with them or anything like that. He just said to one of the other coaches that, yeah, I want him in the corner. He said, yeah, he's a good coach. I want to bring him with me next fight. And then I overheard him saying it, and then like the next day he called me and said, yeah, I'll see you on Saturday. So it was interesting.
How did it go down with the others, though?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, again, it's the respect. I'm coming from that era where, the likes of Earl Austin, Ken Thomas, there's no conversations. Whatever the head coach says, that's it. That's the end of story. So when Don said what he said, that was it. And then, yeah, I think I was in the corner for maybe 3 or 4 fights. And then, he called me about being in the corner for a fight. I think Frank Buglioni was fighting and Derek Chisora. So I was in the corner for both of those. This was the fight just before the Takam fight. And I think that was the first time I did any sort of training at all with Derek in preparation for the Takam fight. And then I think the rematch with Dillian.
So, yeah, talk to me about the difference between, obviously, you get the nod to hand up. And it's a great opportunity. Yeah. But then you're kind of called in to be fully involved in the Chisora camp. Talk to me about that time, the differences. Were you a bit daunted about the prospect of actually being a full-time coach in such a kind of prestigious fight?
No, everything had been planned for so long, and that was the point of being around like the professional scene. You're just waiting for your shot. You're waiting for your time, and obviously when you're waiting so long for something, you're going to be ready. I was just very happy to be part of a team, because he was a figure in the sport, and it was a big fight. Not the fight previously, but the Takam fight was a big fight. It was a very important stage of his career. So watching Derek train for that fight, and putting so much into it, and at the time I think he was being managed. I think he was managed by Hay think he was managed by David Hay at the time. But yeah, had a really good team. Strength and conditioning was good, and everybody worked really, really hard to get that win. That's why everybody was celebrating like that after the fight, because up to that point, I think that was probably Derek's best performance, best win. He's been on a good run since then. So yeah, it was good to be part of that fight. So that was a very special moment for me, because that's the first big training camp I'm involved with Don.
Some people, I think they run before they can walk. We've mentioned that before, but I get the feeling with you that you'd been studying, waiting with the tools in the toolkit for this opportunity.
100%. I mean, watching boxing from 11 and then being involved in the sport that early, walked into the first gym at 13, 14 years old, you're more than ready. And I'm the kind of person that's studying boxing all the time. So even in terms of someone's career, at the time, I could weed off their career quite easily. I was a bit of a historian. We had some really like crazy conversations, like in boxing gyms. Like I'd have a lot of the answers a lot of the time, because that part of it I was so interested in. Like even the month and the date and the year of some fights, I could tell you exactly what was going to happen next, because I used to watch those fights so many times that the tape would wear out and have to go and spend the money to go and order another one. So I was more than ready. It was more excitement more than anything else.
Were you obsessed though? Were you obsessed, and was it the obsession made you good?
Yeah, definitely. I think not wanting to really do anything else, that's what made it for me. I wanted it so badly, and I think the motivation came from not being able to go forward with my own career, and then giving the time to somebody else. I really wanted to make my coach proud and say, because of the time he put into me, I wanted to give it to other people, and then I felt like, I'd actually done something in boxing, even though I didn't get a chance to really box at the level that I wanted to myself. But yeah, it was, every moment to me for every fight is a special one. And, especially with the guys that I built here, even more so. This is actually more important to me than any other fighters, because when you're with someone in the amateurs and then go pro with them and they win something, it's major. It's major.
All done by your hand and their hard work.
Hard work, yeah.
Did you not go to them at the States as well at one point to kind of work under?
Yeah. I went to the Mayweather gym 2 or 3 times.
What was that like working there?
Yeah, luckily enough, I went when a time when Roger was still alive, and they're all very welcoming. I think Badu Jack was there at the time, Otis was there, and I met. I couldn't believe it. It's just by luck, Floyd Mayweather Senior was there one time, and I asked him to show me something. I got it on video, and I said I couldn't. He was so eager to show you. Like he loved helping. Even when he was in the gym, he's like his personality is amazing, man. But anything you want to ask him, he's open to tell you. I didn't like a lot of gyms over here I went to, and I asked them questions like they didn't want to tell you. It's like I remember one coach saying, "No, I don't want to reveal my secrets," and I looked at him and thought,
like, you didn't invent boxing.
Yeah, not even just that, but I'm working in your gym and you don't want to show me what you're doing.
Okay.
I thought that was a bit strange, but over in America, they're a lot more open than that, So, it was. I think that experience was really good as well. I really enjoyed that. But a lot of times I'll just sit at the back and just watch. I mean, even their kids, the discipline of their kids is insane. Like I saw like a 14-year-old shadowboxing for 55 minutes. I don't see that over here.
Because they were told to.
Yeah. And I was lucky enough to go back to the Mayweather gym the next day, and I saw him spar. And honestly, I couldn't believe how much he was using. The shadowbox he was using, he was doing that in the sparring, and it was easy. He had so many set drills. Like whenever you got him to a certain position, he knew exactly what he was going to do next. And I don't really see that here either. Like even in terms of how long guys train for, the closest thing I've seen, honestly, to that is probably the short spell I had with Junior Saba. Because his training sessions are like what mine used to be. Like your pad work was like for half an hour straight, or your bag work was half an hour straight, and then you'll do your skipping. Over here, like every 2 minutes, everyone's taking a break. I didn't come from that, so. But once you're involved in that environment, you kind of have to conform to it because that's what everybody else is doing.
So we're talking about kids that have that discipline. I remember someone coming from Hungary, saying he could not believe how the boxers talk to the coaches, but just the lack of discipline.
I can't stand it.
He was
Honestly,
like, what?
I can't stand it. And some of them actually think that I've got the time to go back and forth with them.
I ain't got time for that, mate.
It's like, no, the coach tells you what it is and you do it.
Or leave.
Or you go somewhere else. And that's what either I've left that situation or, I've told him to leave. Like, it's not, I don't want to be part of that culture because that's not where I came from. When there's a crisis in that ring, you need to listen because that's the person that's going to get you out of trouble. It's not about you being in the gym and having unfortunately, a lot of boxers, they do like an audience. They like to play up in front of a lot of people, and I'm not that kind of person. So if you're going to do that and you're trying to make people feel uncomfortable, it puts me off, and I don't really want to be involved in it, to be honest with you. And I don't really care what level. Like I say, for me, I'd rather take somebody who has no talent and not really going anywhere, but is very respectful and really wants to learn than someone who's really, really good but have got a lot of attitude. I don't have time for it because
thank you.
My dad's very strict. My coach is very strict. My uncle's very strict. That's what I've come from. I don't want to be involved in the nonsense that you guys are involved in. Or if it's normal to you, it's fine. But even in some training camps I've been to and I've seen that sort of behaviour, to be honest with you, I haven't really wanted to go back. It's not. I think it's really weird, and it shows in their performance as well. Like,
and it's disrespectful.
It's horrible.
Working with Chisora and following the split with Mark Tibbs, you then get involved with Dillian Whyte.
I kind of got involved with Dillian before that because I think Dillian, I don't know if he was taking a break or I'm not sure. I can't remember the situation, but his brother used to bring him here. He brought him here for a couple of sessions with me. This is before the Marius Wack fight, before the Joshua Ruiz rematch. So that was the first time I was in the corner for a fight with Dillian. As a second, Mark Tibbs was the head coach. And then we flew out to Portugal. And then there was a split between Dillian and Mark, and then I became the head coach for the first Povetkin fight. It's that again, very grateful to Dillian. I had a much closer relationship with Dillian than I did with Derek because I only did maybe 2 or 3, 4 max training sessions with Derek, and that was the dynamics and the relationship between him and Don was different. I never really got involved in anything like that. Me and Derek were never like that. It would just be high and by. But with Dillian, I spent when obviously it was a lockdown, and obviously you're in the same circle.
But you're the head coach at that point.
Not at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
No, we went out as a team.
So you went out with Mark.
Yeah, we all met up out there in prep for the Povetkin fight.
Initially, was it kind of a thing where I'm going to get involved with Dillian Whyte, and how much more knowledge you can glean from being in this, high performance environment?
No, to be honest with you, I didn't even think that it was going to be long term. There was some things that Dillian wanted to work on, and we had a very, very good time training here. I'll be honest with you, the best time I had, honestly, with Dillian was here because at the time there was no one else in the gym, so I used to train him on his own here.
Nice, yeah.
So we got on really well, and then we moved out obviously to Portugal, and got ready for the Povetkin fight. But very, very hard worker. It's just a shame, obviously, that him and his head coach split at the time, because that's not what I went out to Portugal for, because I've got my own gym to run here. So it was never a thought of it being a long-term situation. It was like, okay, I'm going to help in this camp, and I'm going to go back to my gym and do what I've got to do.
How difficult is it, though, to be in that situation where you're like, okay, I've got my own gym back home, but I'm also being offered a huge opportunity versus I probably don't want to piss off Mark Tibbs. How did you end up navigating that situation?
No, I never really had a relationship with Mark. Like I said, he was only in the corner, and then for a couple of spars, I went up to, I can't remember what it was now, if it was near Essex for some sparring sessions, and then even in Portugal, it was kind of at the beginning of the training camp that they split. So I never really got to know Mark like that. I don't really know Mark, to be honest with you. Obviously got a lot of experience, and obviously his dad has been in boxing a long time as well. So I had a lot of respect for Mark, but I never got to know him like that. But yeah, I got to know Dillian really well, during that time, especially when he was training here before we went out to Portugal. So yeah, it was kind of a natural transition, a natural fit. And obviously I was honoured. I mean, he said, no, I want you to be my head coach. And it was, to be in fights at that magnitude, honestly, obviously still the rematch with Povetkin, um, when he won his interim WBC interim title, that's still my greatest achievement because that's the biggest fight I've been involved in. And then obviously went on to the Fury fight. But, his performance in the rematch with the Povetkin fight was, he didn't put a foot wrong. And, he made one mistake in the first Povetkin fight, which is, I couldn't, even up to now,
Yeah.
Sometimes I just think, how? Like, he was doing everything so well, and so much things you practiced in camp. I mean, even his catch and counters, when he dropped Povetkin twice,
Then he switched off a
the
little
punches
bit.
were so short. He was doing everything so well, and then he kind of just built and continued doing the same thing in the rematch. But he was just so much sharper, and his right hand was really, really good in that fight as well. I said to him that everyone knows you've got a really good left hook, but let's spend some time developing your right hand a bit more. But yeah, I had a really, really good time with Dillian, yeah, he's a very, very good fighter, especially someone who's had 7, 8 amateur fights.
Yeah.
Again, he's one of those guys, rare guys that's come along.
Well, he came from kickboxing,
Yeah,
to be fair.
And he has been able to make up that gap, that
Yeah.
amateur gap that he's inexperienced. But with sparring Hay and Klitschko's and so on, he's managed to make up that gap that he's needed to, and he's got some very, very good wins. Very good wins.
So you get to obviously work with one of the best heavyweights that we've kind of ever produced in this country as well. Inside and outside the ring, he's a character. Was it beneficial? I know, obviously, the pandemic was difficult. People under lockdown, etc. But being in Portugal and kind of being isolated, was that actually beneficial for you guys in a respect? To get to know each other a little bit better, to hone your skills, marry together?
I think it was difficult for everybody, particularly the team, because he lives over there. We all left our families. That was a very, very difficult time because obviously there wasn't many flights at the time. You kind of got stuck over there for a long period. And then we were just very professional. We just got on with it. We knew we had a date to work towards, and we just worked. And yeah, but you kind of, after a while, you just got used to it. It just became normal. Like, it's like, we're out here, we're training, wake up in the morning, train in the morning, come back in the evening and for sparring or pad work or whatever. So it just become routine. So after a while, you get back to your room, you're talking to your family, you got your Zoom calls and so on. So that became normal life after a period.
Yeah.
But it was a very difficult time, especially because, my son was 16, and obviously, that's the time when you have to really make sure you're keeping an eye on, your kids, because 14 to 18 is a very difficult, especially when you've been in education
boys.
and you understand, it's there's a lot of influences out there. And I was particularly worried about that, is making sure that I was around to make sure that, he was making smart choices. But like I said, I come from a great family, so, they've always been very supportive of my son. So I didn't have to worry too much. I always knew kind of what was going on.
And was it the second Povetkin fight that did David Caldwell get brought in?
David,
Was that
Dave
when
Caldwell came
did
for
Dave?
the first one.
Oh, it was the first one. Okay, so talk to me about that situation where people were saying at the time, he's been brought in for a second set of eyes, and he was very respectful. Was that difficult, though, for you, being someone that's the head coach and now you're getting a second pair of eyes coming in, looking over your shoulder? Or was that kind of like, yeah, cool?
No, that's why I asked for. I know those kind of fights at that level, you have to have 2 or 3 experienced people in the corner. Again, luckily enough, I've come from studying boxing for a long time, so I know all the clientele in the corner. I can tell you who's in Riddick Bowe's team or who's in Evander Holyfield's team. You've got 2 or 3 head trainers in there. And so, unfortunately, at the time, it's Nick's the person that I wanted to be the second. But, Nick was getting married on that day when Dillian actually had the fight. So, we kind of all had a conversation, and, Dillian said that he knew Dave Caldwell, and he said, how do you feel about it? I said, yeah, it's fine. He's been involved with Hayes, so obviously he's been at a certain level. But yeah, absolutely fine.
It's very rare that you hear coaches nowadays that don't have an ego. So I'm happy to hear that.
No. When you're coaching at that level, the most important thing is to make sure that you put the fighter first. You know, as good a coach as you are, there's some things you just might not see, and then you're looking towards people that you've been around for a long time, to support you. That's why I really wanted Nick, because me and Nick have done so many corners together.
Yeah.
We look out for different things. Like I always reference, like Evander Holyfield. He's got Georgie Bent in the corner. Great pro, great trainer, but he's got the Duvers in the corner as well. So you're talking about like a wealth of experience. That's important to make sure, and this is for anybody coming up. If you haven't been at that level before, you can make it up by having certain individuals around you, because they will see different things. That's why I was very happy when Harold Knight joined for the rematch of Povetkin, because he's been with Lennox Lewis his whole career. That sort of experience, you can't buy it. I can say that now because I've been there, so I'm that person now. But at the time, you needed those sort of individuals. So it didn't really matter who it was. It was as long as someone who, like you say, didn't have an ego and wanted to work in a team. I was happy to work with anybody, and especially if a fighter recommends somebody, that means that you're obviously comfortable with that person. So yeah, I was more than happy with it.
There has to be one voice, but there's nothing wrong with them whispering in your ear.
100%. And even that, a lot of people make a fuss about the one voice in the corner. It depends, like, how it's being managed.
I agree.
Yeah, like with me and Nick now, like usually if I'm leading the corner, I will say what I've got to say first. He knows when I'm going to finish, and then maybe 10, 15 seconds before the fighter goes out, and Nick will tell the fighter something.
But that's a different thing.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. You still, in my opinion, need one main voice and then maybe a little backup.
100%, yeah. Yeah,
and
that's working a team.
Come on, son. That type of, do you know what
definitely.
I'm saying? Dillian Whyte's fight against Fury, you had Harold Knight in the corner.
Right.
Again, was that a pick of Dillian's, or how did that kind of come about?
I think that was more Dillian's team. But when they mentioned him to me, again, because I've got a couple of VHS tapes with Harold. So I've seen him box before, and I knew about his time with Lennox. I mean, he was with Lennox before Emmanuel Stewart. That's how long Harold been around. Now, if you're being coached by the likes of Emmanuel Stewart and you're still keeping Harold Knight with you, there's got to be a good reason. I got to find that he was very, very easy to work with. I mean, Harold's one of the best coaches I've ever worked with. It's very, very easy. He'll say what he's got to say. I say what I've got to say, and we come together. A lot of times we'll watch footage together, and we're both very, very knowledgeable in the history of the sport. Like me and him will challenge each other all the time. We had some really amazing conversations, like during training camp, and everybody else would have to listen, because the depths we're going to is not what you're used to. Like me and Darryl Harrell will go like all out, talking about certain fights, like early Gatti fights and Robertson fights and so on. So yeah, I thought I was very, very comfortable with Harold. It was very hard because obviously the physical side of training a heavyweight is hard. It's very heavy on you.
Trust me, I know.
but in terms of technically and understanding like what a fighter needs, he was great. I mean, even now, we as a club, I wish I could afford to have Harold here. He was very helpful with Jesse Brandon, one of my pros. Very helpful with Yusuf Kamari, and K Prosper. There's quite a lot of my fighters came out, and Harold would take their corner during sparring and give them a lot of good advice. They all said the same thing about him. Of all the coaches I've had around me, I'd say Harold was one of the best.
What are the most valuable lessons that you've taken away from boxing?
Most valuable, I think the experience with most of my amateurs, and for them to progress and become professionals, being part of their journey. I've learned a lot from them. It's made me a better coach, definitely.
In terms of technically, or just, I don't know, emotionally, or?
I think the main thing is because they're all different characters and personalities, and they've all got different styles. I've learned to deal with all those things, and it's made me a much more well-rounded coach. Let's put it that way.
Do you think that in some respects your job as a coach is bigger than being, is bigger than the technical aspects of boxing. Do you feel, especially as a black man, that you're kind of a community mentor, that it's sometimes your job to kind of, I don't know, instill aspects of, I don't know, manhood or respect or, we could go on into young people?
I'd say definitely. You know, I started in primary, and I remember reading some articles about a lot of young black kids failing in secondary schools, and I didn't really want to work in secondary schools, but some of the teachers said maybe it'd be a good idea because of the work you've done here. They'd appreciate you. With the older kids. So I think I'm more proud, honestly, of the fact that I've helped so many young people through their journey, their lives. As children, through to adulthood, and working in different boroughs as well. When you're around the scene, the circuit, people recognize the work you're doing. No matter how many big fights I've been involved with, it's nothing compared to the community knowing that I've contributed. I'm more happy about that, to be honest with you, than even more so than the boxing.
I think you just answered my next question, to be fair, because when I walk into this gym, and I've only been here a few times, but I think it's really apparent the effect that you have on the young people, and it is a very diverse
Group.
group of
Yeah.
young people.
Yeah.
Which gives you the most pride? Winning, being in the corner of a huge fight, or just getting the recognition, or just seeing one kid who couldn't possibly move their feet, or were in a life of whatever, and all of a sudden they're rising.
I think above all else, life skills. One of my very first boxers, I met him 14 years old, and he, was getting in a lot of trouble. And I remember saying to the head coach at the time, the gym that I was at, I said, that kid can be really good. And so he came in, I said to him, yeah, come back tomorrow. And he kept coming in. And, years later, we had a conversation, maybe 3, 4, 5 years later. And he said, I said, what changed? You're talking about getting married now, and, you're working and, enjoying your boxing. He said, to be honest with you, it's just because you were willing to give me your time. He said, it was just as simple as that. I'd never walked into a boxing gym before. So for someone to tell me, come back tomorrow, keep coming back and spending time, help me to improve my boxing. He said, that's what changed. He said, there wasn't really much else going on. He said, there wasn't really a troublemaker. He used to get in a lot of trouble for trying to defend people. And so that's how he used to get in a lot of problems. But yeah, we're very, we're very close now, and he's one of the coaches in my gym. But yeah, one of the best boxers I've ever had. But that to me is worth tenfold, honestly, compared to being in a big fight. I mean, I've got so used to being involved in the corner in fights that it's second nature. I remember doing another interview and someone asking me about some of the bigger fights I've been involved in, and I said it feels exactly like the small horse show fights because you're on job. The only time I noticed is when I was walking, I think, out of the arena, walking from the ring back to the changing room. Then I noticed the amount of people. But as I'm walking there, there's tunnel vision. I don't even realize those people are there. I'm so concerned with making sure that I'm there for my boxer, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is to get out of that ring safe, and we're responsible for that. So that's number one. And obviously, I want to win. I hate losing. That's why I used to box, because I was competitive. But your life, their life's in your hands, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and it's on that note, it is a tough call, and it's very easy, isn't it, for us on the outside to say shoulda, coulda, woulda, but effectively, it's you or the ref, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And you have to understand that. I mean, even when I do eventually retire from coaching, I'm very interested involved being a judge. And someone suggested, oh, what about refereeing? I said, I've gone through a whole career of having to be responsible for somebody. I don't want that responsibility again. I'd rather be a judge, because you're judging fights, but when you're reffing a fight, again, you are responsible for those two people in that ring. You've got to make the right calls at the right time. And yeah, it's very difficult. I think people obviously on the outside don't understand that part of it. But that to me is the most important part, is, making sure my boxers leave that ring healthy, you know.
Have you ever got the call wrong or hesitated on a call?
No, no, I've had to make I've only had to make a call to stop a fight twice, and one didn't take it very well, and I understand that. I wouldn't want to be stopped either, but I could see what was coming. I've been around long enough, studied boxing long enough to see when, we used to talk about lining somebody up. You're lining somebody up to go and finish them with a shot. And if you can see that coming and your boxer's way behind on points, you're not supposed to lead them in that situation. You're supposed to save them from themselves. And you know what can happen after. Everyone's not going to no one's going to take that well. Some people do say, well, I understand it and I appreciate it. Others will say, listen, I would have got through it. And, it's for you to make that call and you've got to live with that call. Very, very difficult. But yeah, the couple of times I've had to do it, yeah, I had no issues doing it whatsoever. At least I can see you living a normal life. I'd rather not have left you in there for another 10, 15 seconds and then God knows what will happen.
Yeah. I've done it only once and I got cursed out.
Yeah.
But you know what? I
Yeah.
take that cussing.
Yep, I'll take it. Seriously.
It's apparent to me the influence that you have on your fighters. It's apparent to me that you've poured into them because of the type of young people that are coming out of here. And I'm not necessarily talking about, great technical boxers, also, although they are good boxers, they're technical boxers. I'm talking about them as, young men and women. And so having been an amateur coach and knowing how much time and effort, I do have to commend you because you've stuck at it and you are in the sport for the right reason and you are most certainly giving back and blessing people. And so, yeah, I think it's amazing the work that you're doing here. I hope that you continue to do it. I know it's not always easy. People need to start putting their hands in the pocket and funding this club. But, and yeah, listen, thanks ever so much for, just giving me a bit of your time and sharing your story with me.
Oh, you're more than welcome.